there are at least 100 to 200 billion planets in our Milky Way. But that's not an estimate, that's a lower limit. However, if you were to make an estimate, you'd get a number that's closer to 10 trillion planets in our galaxy alone. And remember, our galaxy is not alone in the universe, with at least 200 billion galaxies out there, and possibly even more. This amount of planets would impress even the least imaginative people around us. So we ask the big question, how could our little blue planet be the only one to harbour life in the universe, as there are so many, and it would be arrogant of us to think that we're alone in the universe. There is possibly civilizations out there that are millions of years ahead of us. So imagine how advanced they could be. It is claimed that alien races have been visiting us for thousands of years, checking on our progress, and there have been thousands of cases of people being abducted. Some of these on numerous occasions, and we do not know why. There have been theories that they are using our DNA to create human-alien hybrids. But why? For their own dying species on their planet, or to eventually take over this planet with more advanced beings? Either way, it seems they will continue to abduct us and experiment on us. And the following 3 stories are just a few of the many thousands of people who have had their lives changed for better or worse by their abduction. Number 3. Carol and Helen Thomas. In the early hours of March the 30th, 1988, 24-year-old Helen Thomas and her 45-year-old mother Carol set off for work at the nearby mill in Birmingham, England. They walked through the city housing estates and back alleyways as they always did, and the walk normally took them about 15 minutes. This particular morning, where it was still dark, both women suddenly noticed a low humming sound above them before an intense bright light shone down. It was like somebody shining a bright torch, which effectively blinded them. They both stopped and looked up, becoming frightened as the light got larger and larger until it was directly above their heads. In fear, they both held hands and then started to feel dizzy. As the light disappeared, both women came to their senses, feeling a little nauseous. Helen's leather jacket was soaking wet, yet all around them the ground was dry. Feeling confused, the 2 women carried on their way to work. Once they were there, they were informed by the security guards that they were several hours late. Over the following days, their skin would come out in blisters and rashes, and both started having nosebleeds and a discharge from their navels, and a constant feeling of anxiety ran through both women. As well as the symptoms, Helen noticed a circular patch of hair was missing from the nape of her neck. Both women needed to know what had happened to their lost time, and if they'd not been together when their abduction took place, they would have felt they'd imagined everything. It would be several years before they made contact with leading UFO researcher Tony Dodd, who agreed to conduct interviews with the women under hypnosis, which took place on the 12th of March 1994. Each were hypnotised separately, out of earshot and out of sight of each other, where Carol was hypnotised first. She recalled being taken into a large bright room and laid on a table. The room was all white and seemed to have a window all the way round it. Whilst on the table, she could not move and was naked with an unusual net-like material on her legs that felt wet and seemed to weigh her down. Carol looked across at her daughter and could see that she was in the same predicament. Carol then went on to describe their abductors as very small with tiny ears and big black eyes. They were very thin, with 3 long thin fingers with large heads, and their skin was white. They started touching her stomach, and their fingers were very cold. They had a long thin tube which they pushed into her navel, but she could feel no pain. As they removed the tube, Carol could see it was full of fluid and realised they were taking eggs from her body. As this was happening, she was begging them not to hurt her daughter. A cup-shaped object was then placed over her head. short time later, she was allowed off the table and taken to a large screen. One of the aliens pushed some buttons, and a succession of symbols including triangles, squares and wavy lines appeared on the screen, followed by a documentary-type footage of wars and explosions. Carol could see there were other beings at the back of the room who were taller, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, wearing a suit with a blue badge containing a circle, a triangle, and two wavy lines. She then remembered putting her clothes back on and feeling dizzy, and then finding herself and her daughter back in the alley. Her daughter Helen was then hypnotised, where she experienced exactly the same procedure as her mother. However, as they questioned her further, Helen was able to recall previous abductions, where her first abduction was in childhood, and also described the small men. Helen said she was 5 years old and playing in a field of buttercups when the aliens took her somewhere and examined her, and then took her off to a room full of strange-looking children. She was then asked to draw pictures of animals, and the strange-looking children had to copy what she'd drawn. Helen said she was given a strange stone, as were the other children, and she kept it under her bed, where she heard voices coming from it. Under hypnosis, Helen was able to recall many other abductions that had taken place over the years. After the session, they asked Carol whether she remembered her daughter with the strange stone, where her mother said yes, but she had no idea where she'd got it from. Number 2. Tracy and Darren Jones. The following mysterious events happened to Tracy and Darren Jones from England in the summer of 1993. They were residing in a 300-year-old cottage that they rented from Tracy's parents, and the events appeared to be a cross between hauntings, poltergeist activity and alien visitations, and whether they were all related is not clear. One evening about 9 p.m, they heard a humming noise coming from outside, and when they went to look out the window, initially saw nothing. After a few minutes, an intense light engulfed their cottage, lasting about 15 minutes according to the clock, but it felt like a few seconds to the Joneses. The next morning, as Darren went outside, he found a wrought iron gate at the front had been wrenched open and twisted, and the padlocks on the stable doors had been forced open. And this would happen regularly for the next few weeks. Shortly after moving into the cottage, Tracy had a chest operation that later became infected. However, she was eventually allowed to come home and was heavily bandaged and in pain. One morning she awoke to find the bandages gone, and neither of them could find them. When the nurse came to change the dressing, she found the wound was clean and healthy looking and almost healed. On another occasion, Darren awoke to see a figure near the window about the same size as Tracy, looking in the box where the bandages and medicines were kept. He assumed it was Tracy looking for painkillers, but when he laid back down, he saw Tracy was next to him in bed, and when he quickly looked back at the figure, it had gone. Whilst in the cottage, there were other strange happenings, such as doors opening and closing on their own, where she would regularly find household items moved about, or even having vanished completely, only to turn up again completely out of the blue. Electrical appliances would stop working without reason, and both Tracy and her husband would awake to see strange figures around their bed. They both assumed the cottage was haunted. When they moved to another old property, similar events started happening, with the toilet flushing by itself, and the bath filling and emptying by itself, and the TV turning itself on and off. They would hear footsteps, and the rooms always smelled of lavender. One house they rented overlooked the Yorkshire Dales, where they observed bright lights putting on amazing displays, and observed the underside of a UFO as it turned horizontally every 30 seconds, of which they filmed. They reported the incident to the RAF base, and within 24 hours their property had been burgled, where the tape, computer and printer were taken, yet jewellery and cash were left untouched. One morning, Darren had walked into the bathroom for a shower, and after a few seconds, Tracy followed after him, but could not see him anywhere, yet the shower had been used. She then looked all around the house and outside, looking for him, and when she returned to the bathroom, he was standing there in front of the mirror, and swore he had been there the whole time and had not gone anywhere. A short time later, Darren would lose time, where his short 5-minute journey would take half an hour, and he could not account for the missing time. By this stage, they had a family, and strange occurrences were now happening to the children, where they started seeing and hearing strange people with hoods and long white beards. Since the age of 4, Tracy had always felt she was being watched and suffered from many fears and phobias, and with all the recent events, the fears became stronger. In July of 1997, Darren was posted to Dubai, where the family was to join him in 7 weeks. The strange thing is that in the 7 weeks Darren spent by himself in Dubai, nothing strange ever happened to him, but as soon as Tracy joined him, all of the strange events started happening again. The family later returned to England, where the house was again plagued by mysterious bangs and noises, where again objects would disappear and reappear somewhere else. One day, Darren went to sleep on the sofa, but later found himself on the floor with the fire turned on, and he had no idea how he got there and did not remember turning on the fire. Well-known alien investigator Tony Dodd had Tracy hypnotised, where she recalled seeing the hooded men with white beards and found herself lying on a white table with rounded ends and unable to move. There was a powerful white light shining down on her exposed chest. A mechanical arm and needle then came down and entered the open wound, and she felt a burning sensation, and there were shadowy figures moving about the room. Under regular hypnotic regression, Tracy described being abducted when she was young. Each time she was subjected to medical tests and examinations, including the removal of eggs through a long silver tube. What's more, she claimed during these sessions that her husband and the children had also been abducted on regular occasions, and the children had also been abducted since birth. Number 1. Gary Wood. This story was told by Gary Wood, who at the time of the incident was a 33-year-old ambulance technician from Edinburgh, and was with his friend Colin Wright as they were driving to Tarbrax, South Lanarkshire in Scotland, where both men claimed they were abducted and examined by extraterrestrials after the van was ambushed by a UFO. The following is an account of the incident that happened just after 10 p.m. on August 17, 1992. As they were driving, Gary noticed a black object in the distance. Alerting his friend, both men watched as the object came closer before a blinding white light formed a wall in front of the vehicle. Wood continued to drive the car forwards, transfixed by the bright intensity. Gary then claimed that his friend blacked out for what seemed like 10 to 15 seconds. Gary thought he had died. When he woke up, the car had come to a complete stop and was facing in the opposite direction on the other side of the road. They had no memory of turning the vehicle around or what had happened to the light or the object they had seen. When Wood looked at his wristwatch, it now read just after 11 p.m. Both men were extremely shaken and realised something was wrong. Shortly after the incident, the pair visited paranormal investigator Malcolm Robinson, who convinced them to undergo hypnotic therapy. They reluctantly underwent hypnotic regression to try to recover the lost hour of time. Both spoke of feeling an intense pain as the car had driven into the light, as if they were experiencing a strong electric shock. They describe a UFO about 20 feet high and 30 feet wide, and black with no lights. 3 extraterrestrial beings had come to the vehicle and escorted both men onto their spacecraft, which had landed in the road. Each was stripped of his clothing and placed on a table for examination. Wood recalled that he could hear agonizing human screams coming from the room around him. Overseeing the whole episode was a tall creature with a large head and big dark eyes. Speaking 4 years later in 1996, Gary Wood described in more detail his abduction experience. I saw 3 creatures coming towards my car. I felt an intense pain like an electric shock. Then I was in some room. I saw small men moving about doing something to me. Then this 6-foot creature approached. It was white grey in colour with a large head and dark eyes with a long slender neck, very slim shoulders and waist. The little ones were about 3 feet tall and seemed to be doing all of the work, while the bigger ones did the communication. Mr. Wood also claimed that a red-hot poker-like object was put into his eye, and he was surrounded by other crying humans. However, it is what Wood claimed the alien through telepathy said to him that is perhaps the most chilling. In response to a question Wood could not recall asking, the tall alien stated, "Sanctuary. We are here already, and we are coming here."